You don't just bounce back. You rebuild from ashes they never thought you'd escape. They assumed you'd collapse under pressure, but they didn't realize you were made in the aftermath of spiritual collisions. What looked like your end was actually where your vision was forged, not through comfort, but through collapse. The pain they orchestrated was supposed to silence you, but it sharpened you instead. Now, you don't just survive attacks. You carry a force that warns the next one not to try. This isn't just bad luck circling you, it's been engineered. Someone hid behind fake smiles and empty gestures, stirring doubts around your name like poison in the well. And for what? A bruised ego. A fantasy romance that lived only in their mind. Their obsession became a blueprint for betrayal. But where most would have been blindsided, you caught the shift in energy before the knife ever left their hand. You watched the performance, saw the strings, read the script, and rewrote the ending. Because when they tried to cast you as the fool, you showed up as the mirror. They crossed lines you didn't even know they'd dare. Quiet plotting, cloaked intentions, and an exit plan carved from cruelty, all to erase your light. But they didn't know that heaven had already filed a motion in your favor. The moment they moved against you, a shield dropped they couldn't breach. What they labeled coincidence was your higher self interrupting the ritual. The darkness they summoned couldn't touch you because your origin is somewhere they can't reach. You were never a target. You were the test. And they failed. There's something different about the ones who've already made peace with the idea of loss. They carry a calm that unsettles anyone still clinging to illusions of control. That's the energy you walked in with. And someone saw it too late. They thought they were building something secure, only to realize the very foundation was borrowed time. You didn't steal anything. Your presence alone brought clarity. And that clarity exposed everything they were pretending not to feel. Jealousy wasn't born from a betrayal. It was born from realization that you were the version of love they thought only existed in dreams. What they wanted couldn't be given. It had to be earned. But they tried to fast-track their place in a story that was never meant for them. The irony? You were never in competition. You existed outside their calculations, outside their imagined outcomes, outside their rules. And when they watched someone they loved look at you like you were the missing chapter, it unraveled something ancient in them, a fear that they were always meant to be the observer, never the main character. They mistook your presence for interference, when in truth, it was illumination. Instead of sinking into their emotional trap, you moved with intention. You didn't match their chaos with retaliation. You responded with silence, and that silence was louder than any confrontation. When given the opportunity to stoop low, you elevated higher. No passive aggression, no drama-laced retaliation, just an unbothered exit that haunted them more than an argument ever could. Your calm wasn't passive, it was the result of deep internal discipline. And it reminded them of every place they were still fragmented. They thought walking away was weakness, until your absence started echoing in places your presence once brought peace. You became the mirror they didn't want to face, simply by refusing to perform for their dysfunction. You didn't withhold truth to punish. You withheld it because explaining yourself to confusion is a waste of breath. What they read as arrogance was actually restraint. You could have exposed everything, but you chose self-respect over spectacle. That's power. That's spiritual rank. Not every threat is loud. Sometimes the real danger is the one who knows how to remain calm in a storm they could have ended with a whisper. You knew exactly what they were planning before they even spoke it. And still, you let them show their hand. You let them believe you were oblivious. Not because you were naive, but because you were protected. You were never out of control. You just stopped explaining your intuition to people who can't hear past their projections. They mistook your distance for disinterest, but it was self-preservation. You saw what was coming. You always do. And while they were busy trying to make you a casualty in a game they didn't even understand, you activated a protection that had nothing to do with luck. You weren't spared because you hid. You were spared because you're on assignment. And interference with that kind of purpose always ends in reversal. Every calculated move against you only revealed their own instability. They tried to turn emotion into weaponry, but you don't respond to emotional blackmail. They designed a narrative where you were supposed to be the one needing closure, but you had already closed the chapter before they even knew it was ending. What they did wasn't about love. It was control dressed as intimacy. And you don't negotiate with control. You just leave. Because a chosen one doesn't beg to be understood. They just keep walking, and let the silence do the speaking. They thought they were setting a trap, but what they triggered was their own unmasking. While they choreographed every false gesture with surgical precision, your perception cut through the illusion before their act even began. They invested time into shaping fake obligations, scripting moments meant to twist reality, and laying groundwork for a collapse they hoped would benefit them. But by then, your presence had already dissolved the fog. Where they tried to confuse others into turning against you, your grounded clarity made their story feel hollow. Every attempt to plant distortion was swallowed by the sharpness of your alignment. It was never random. Their entire scheme was plotted like a chess game with you as the assumed pawn. But what they didn't account for was how many battles you'd already mastered in silence. You didn't need to expose them. Your existence alone disrupted the current. Their system relied on your fear, your desperation, your confusion. And when you met their malice with equilibrium, the framework collapsed on itself. You rose, not by countering every move, but by refusing to descend into the pit they dug. They were playing with wire and shadow. You were moving with depth and stillness. They underestimated your resilience because they misunderstood the source of your calm. But what unnerved them most wasn't your reaction, it was the absence of one. You'd already experienced the kind of endings that remold a soul. You'd stared into the places most people deny exist, and came back with something sacred in your hands. That knowing, born from thresholds you've crossed in silence, became your armor. The closeness you've had with endings has become your greatest opening. It's what makes you unshaken. You've rehearsed loss, outgrown grief, and made sanctuary out of endings. The life you've lived trained you for the invisible war others don't believe is real. The pressure they sent your way wasn't new. It mirrored storms you've already outlived. So when their chaos approached, you didn't flinch. You expanded. You didn't argue. You listened. You didn't defend. You observed. And in that stillness, they met their match. Their intention wasn't simply to hurt, it was to erase. But what they collided with was someone shaped in fire and sculpted in silence. Every battle you've endured became a layer of armor they can't penetrate or even understand. Now they're left chasing an explanation that doesn't exist in their framework. Their calculations didn't fail because they lacked resources. They failed because they couldn't measure you properly. They underestimated the energy they were trespassing on. And now, as their plan decays, they're grasping at meanings. Trying to decode what went wrong. Asking the void for answers while you remain unreachable, not by hiding, but by standing in a realm they can't access. The aftermath has silenced them more than exposure ever could. Their deception didn't vanish, it rebounded. Every lie became a knot in their own path. Every manipulated truth has become a mirror they can't avoid. And in the middle of that collapse, they keep looking back, hoping your compassion will return to save them from the web they spun. But you've already stepped beyond that version of you. What they hoped would break you only clarified how far you've risen. They are now bound to the weight of their own inventions, while you walk free. Not because you escaped, but because you were never caught. They spoke to others about you with false certainty, unaware that the story was still unfolding in dimensions they couldn't read. They built narratives to justify their betrayal, rehearsed speeches to cover their greed. But while they were speaking lies into ears that barely listened, your truth was echoing in a higher place, writing endings they never got to script. And now, with the spotlight gone and their audience fading, they're left with nothing but the consequences of targeting someone protected by the very universe they tried to manipulate. They underestimated how dangerous kindness can be when it has boundaries. While they expected forgiveness to look like surrender, you redefined grace as distance. Their panic now speaks louder than their accusations ever did. The way they scramble for your attention, the way their lies twist into desperation, it all reveals who truly held the power. Their sudden regret isn't repentance, it's fear. And you didn't need revenge. Your silence alone became the echo that unraveled their illusion of control. They can't stomach how your stability threatens their sense of worth. The core of their resentment isn't personal, it's energetic. You operate with ease in places they've only accessed through struggle. The more you align with what lights you up, the more their confusion multiplies. You've built something out of nothing and turned it into more than survival. You turned it into joy. That's what unsettles them most. Not just that you've made peace with who you are, but that your peace has become profitable in ways they can't decode. Just by existing, you dismantled every mask they were hiding behind. You didn't need to call them out. Your life did. They watched as your joy didn't require control. Your growth wasn't loud, but it was impossible to ignore. They were chasing applause. You were following alignment. And that subtle difference made them question every performance they've ever put on. What you carry can't be imitated because it doesn't come from performance. It comes from rootedness. And that's what stripped their illusions bare. The glow they tried to copy was never about aesthetics. It was energy. What they couldn't replicate was the way people naturally trusted you, leaned into your presence, and left transformed. You brought clarity into rooms without raising your voice. You revived what others gave up on, not with effort, but with presence. And instead of being inspired, they grew envious. Because your gift reminded them that masks can't replace depth. You didn't compete. You just embodied. And that alone became a disruption. Their resentment wasn't birthed from logic. It was ignited by contrast. You didn't preach love, you walked in it. You didn't beg for validation, you radiated it. And when people saw that you could offer safety without strings, that you could love without needing to control, it unsettled those who were still bargaining for worth. You became a mirror, and they weren't ready for the reflection. So they attacked what they couldn't integrate, hoping to fracture what felt unshakable. The journey you've survived has already broken every illusion they thought would work against you. They tried to strip you of dignity, not knowing you already gave up ego a long time ago. You've lived through nights that felt like endings. You've faced silences so heavy they left echoes in your chest. And every time you rose, it wasn't with anger, it was with knowing. That knowing became your compass. It turned trauma into clarity. Grief into instruction. Survival into embodiment. What nearly took you out became the very thing that refined your vision. You're not reacting to them, you're remembering your own blueprint. They mistook your strength for distance, your boundaries for arrogance. But all you did was choose wholeness over drama. That choice is what positioned you where you are now. While they seek sympathy for their collapse, you're too busy expanding. You've already forgiven the chaos. But you'll never again invite it back to the table. They mistook your comfort with endings for fragility, not realizing you've walked through thresholds they've only ever feared in nightmares. Where others freeze at the thought of finality, you greet it like an old companion. They launched their chaos with precision, expecting panic, and instead, they met your grin. Their intricate sabotage looked more like a child's tantrum than strategy to someone who's faced storms so massive. Silence was the only way to survive. You didn't just see through it, you chuckled. Because nothing built from fear can stand in the presence of someone built by truth. They planned around clocks and calendars, but your rhythm doesn't answer to time, it moves with purpose. They thought threats would shake you, But they forgot you've been emptied and refilled too many times to fear another version of yourself being shed. Every so-called ending in your life was actually a doorway in disguise. And while they scrambled to control moments, you already surrendered long ago to the unfolding. Each identity you've buried gave birth to a clearer one. That's why you don't resist change. You embody it. You've emerged not from privilege, but from collapse. And what you carry isn't polished armor, it's scarred insight. Every fracture became part of your foundation. The pain you were handed didn't just pass, it transformed. It carved out strength in places most people never look. What tried to crush you only created a sharper lens. You don't just recover, you build. And the light you now hold isn't decorative. It's functional. It blinds deception and reveals what's been hiding in plain sight. Protection flows around you because the work you've done is ancient. The force guarding you isn't reactionary. It's ancestral memory encoded in your spirit. When they thought they were striking someone ordinary, they unknowingly challenged an entire lineage. They didn't see the echo behind your eyes, the centuries of wisdom watching through you. They mistook your quiet for absence and your grace for inexperience. But your essence carries signals they'll never decipher. You weren't unready. You were simply untouchable. You read people before they speak, feel intentions before they form. That's not intuition. It's mastery. Their masks slip the moment they enter your field. You don't need proof because your spirit doesn't lie. They regret stepping out of alignment with you, not because they miss your presence, but because they now recognize what truth felt like before they betrayed it. The one who broke the bond is haunted by the clarity you offered, by the glimpse of something sacred they abandoned in favor of illusion. You saw the script unfolding and refused to participate. They mistook detachment for indifference, but it was self-preservation at its highest form. You didn't need to argue. You didn't plead. You simply vanished from reach. That's how deep your self-worth runs. You were willing to lose them to protect your clarity. And in that stillness, you made your standards known, without explanation, without permission. You set a boundary so firm, it echoed louder than any confrontation ever could. Now their creation is crumbling, not because you interfered, but because your absence collapsed the illusion. The chaos they curated has turned on them. The weight of their own choices is louder than any warning you could have given. You didn't expose them, the truth did. And you let it. Because you no longer carry the burden of protecting people from the consequences they invited. The only thing you ever owed them was the silence that gave them the space to meet their own reflection. They thought your silence meant they won, but it was actually the sound of your protection locking in. The moment you cut off access, everything began revealing itself in rapid succession. Chaos they once concealed is now laid bare under the clarity of your absence. You never needed to retaliate. Your refusal to entertain dysfunction spoke louder than confrontation ever could. Distance, in your case, became divine intervention. You chose detachment not to punish, but to preserve what they never knew how to honor in the first place. Wholeness isn't found in one side of the spectrum. It's the ability to hold contrast without crumbling. You navigate polarity with precision, understanding that some things require tenderness, while others demand dismantling. What makes you unsettling to many is that you're not confined to sweetness or softness. You can build and dismantle with equal devotion. You know when to nurture and when to walk away. You're not afraid of endings because you've mastered what comes after, renewal. That makes you unpredictable to those who rely on control. What they saw as mixed signals was actually range. You carry a rare flexibility that bends with the moment without snapping. When people approach with peace, they meet your grace. When they bring conflict, they're met with a boundary. You give them the choice, but you always hold the center. Your ability to match energy without losing identity is something their strategies can't account for. While they plan for a reaction, you deliver outcomes. You never raise your voice, but your silence rearranges everything. You're not interested in pretending to be calm. You are calm. Because you've already survived worse than their projections. You've lived through fires they would never dare enter, and that gives you an internal anchor that no amount of slander can shake. You've refined yourself in ways no title or status could replicate. And when they tried to distort your essence, it didn't stick, because you didn't flinch. They crafted lies, but your energy said otherwise. And people believed what they felt, not what they heard. Even when unseen, your impact registers. Not through image, but through influence. The results of your alignment are tangible. Opportunities arise without force. Protection manifests without explanation. People sense something different in you, something not of this world but deeply embedded in it. Your stillness shifts atmospheres. Your presence clears confusion. You don't chase visibility because your resonance carries farther than volume ever could. What you've built didn't come from shortcuts. It was carved through spiritual labor no one witnessed. The roads you walked were lonely, the sacrifices invisible. But the fruits are undeniable. The ones who truly know you aren't fooled by gossip or distraction. They've watched you evolve, shed old skins, and rise from collapses that would have buried others. They don't admire you because you survived. They respect you because of how you did it, with grace, depth, and zero need to be applauded for the pain you endured. Each hardship added something rare to your being. Not bitterness, but precision. Not vengeance, but discernment. You learned not just how to rebuild, but how to protect what you rebuild. You didn't escape destruction. You learned how to carry light through it. And now, every false story told about you only highlights one truth. They never really knew who they were dealing with. Because if they had, they would have never dared to test someone forged in the one place most people never return from, transformation. Some people memorize wisdom. Others become it. You've been shaped by collisions most would avoid, molded by truths that only reveal themselves in the middle of collapse. That's why your insight doesn't sound rehearsed. It pulses with the weight of experience. The energy around you is thick with depth because it's not borrowed from books or inherited from teachers. It was earned in silence, carved out through nights where clarity had to be dug from confusion. What you carry now is the natural result of what you chose to survive. You don't wear victory like decoration. You walk in it because it's embedded in your rhythm. Every breakthrough you've had was witnessed by those around you. No promotion, no performance. Just transformation in real time. What you've endured became public record, not through what you said, but through how your presence shifted. Your life keeps proving that adversity isn't the end. It's the sharpening. That's why you're no longer questioned. You're recognized. There's a rare kind of intelligence that comes from not just seeing deception, but knowing exactly what it costs to fall for it. You've developed that clarity. The moment someone speaks, you feel their alignment. You read intent without needing evidence. This sensitivity doesn't isolate you. It protects you. And more than that, it positions you. Because your choices, your career, your movement, they're all synced with your original frequency. You don't push your path. You flow through it. That's what makes you untouchable. The space you've created is sacred. You built it without compromise, which is why it doesn't crumble under pressure. Your life now operates from overflow, not survival. And that magnetism, that calm, aligned strength, unsettles those who rely on pretending. They can't decode how you made it work without manipulation. But you didn't make it work. You became it. While others copy aesthetics, you embody essence. And that scares people who hope success required suffering alone. You've moved beyond proving your worth. There's no need to convince when your example teaches louder than your words. You've stepped out of the outdated loops, the spiritual noise, the recycled pain cycles, and now you lead without needing a stage. You didn't just learn lessons. You absorbed them. You didn't just overcome, you integrated. Now, your story doesn't just inspire, it instructs. And those watching sense that this is no performance. It's a transmission. There's a difference between confidence and conviction. You live in the latter. Because you've watched impossible things unfold just because you stayed aligned. You've seen prayers become provision. You felt guidance speak in ways that required no audience. And through it all, you kept your softness without being devoured. You learned the difference between compassion and compliance. You love without leaking. You give without losing. That's why your posture changed, because your identity did. What radiates from you isn't light alone, it's memory. Memory of who you had to become when no one was watching. And that memory moves through everything you touch. It's why people sense a difference but can't name it. You vibrate in truth, and truth has its own gravitational pull. What doesn't belong falls away. What's aligned finds you. And what once overwhelmed you now orbits your stillness, never again allowed to enter. You didn't heal just to feel better. You healed to become a frequency that can't be faked. Some souls are born with medicine in their bones, and you've become one of them. The kind of force that moves through your being doesn't need to be spoken to be understood. It pulses in your presence, reshaping whatever space you enter. Healing isn't just something you offer, it's who you are. The way you rebuild after devastation, the way your body recenters after chaos, the way your spirit stays whole when everything else fractures, that's not natural. That's sacred. You are proof that restoration isn't a miracle. It's your rhythm. You move in cycles of renewal that make destruction irrelevant. While others brace for collapse, you're already listening for the next breath of creation. There's a harmony stitched into your very existence, one that rearranges energy simply by aligning with it. You don't preach rebirth, you embody it. Others come undone in endings. You emerge. Because your journey has never been about avoiding death, it's been about rising from its dust, more alive, more attuned, more unstoppable every single time. Your restoration travels beyond the physical. What you offer pierces the emotional, untangles the mental, and reprograms the spiritual. You've walked into spaces where hope had flatlined and revived it without even trying. Even those who tried to dismantle you have felt your power soften their chaos. Not because you let them back in, but because your very nature contradicts bitterness. You heal because your loyalty is to truth, not ego. That's how you remain elevated while others are trapped in cycles they created themselves. You've chosen the higher route so many times it's no longer a decision. It's your default. The ones who tried to twist your name now sit in the very consequences they engineered. Every piece of their undoing carries their fingerprints. Meanwhile, you flourish, not by force, not by manipulation, but by walking in what's real. You've turned your own life into a beacon, a blueprint, a silent sermon that teaches without needing applause. You shine and it exposes. You rise and it convicts. The contrast between your stillness and their chaos is the loudest truth of all. While they drown in what they unleashed, you keep receiving everything they said you didn't deserve. Support shows up unannounced. Doors swing open without knocking. Not because you hustle harder, but because your alignment creates gravity. People gravitate toward you not for performance, but because your spirit makes them feel safe, seen, and slightly more whole. Their plan dissolved the moment it clashed with the divine order written over your life. The unraveling they face isn't just fallout, it's correction. The cosmos doesn't need your defense. Your consistency did the work. You proved that patience outruns manipulation. That peace outlasts sabotage. And now the scoreboard is cosmic. Their losses multiply, while your gains become legacy. What they tried to silence is now too loud to ignore. You aren't living off survival anymore. You're powered by purpose. What surrounds you now isn't fleeting. It's foundational. You're building a life that doesn't need maintenance, only expansion. Your stability isn't luck, it's earned order. Everything they questioned, your strength, your legitimacy, your worth, is now written in the outcomes they can't explain and can't stop. Because the truth is, you didn't beat them. They beat themselves trying to destroy someone untouchable. Every piece of your path reflects back favor. Every decision you've made from a place of integrity has bloomed into blessings you never had to beg for. Your alignment isn't just personal, it's magnetic. It shifts things for others.